Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be working on the shooting stance. So this is going to be the modern isosceles stance that most people are teaching and using nowadays. It's been around for a while. It's a well-proven shooting stance to help you shoot quick and accurately and also move when you need to. Unlike some older shooting positions, this one's easier to move in and out of the shooting stance or shooting position to get into the next one to continue shooting. We'll work from the base up, talking about our feet, up to the top of our body. So first up, getting a good base. Feet are about shoulder width apart. Now I like to have my strong foot about half a foot to a foot back. Some people will have them completely in line with each other, but dropping just about half a foot to a foot back allows us to get a little more stable of a base. Now our upper body, we're going to want to lean most of this body weight towards that front foot so we can really control the recoil. Now our handguns don't recoil much, but if we really control our body weight and the gun, we can contain that recoil pretty well and have it flat shooting. So by doing this, we establish a good base. Now our base changes. Sometimes we have to move and shoot, and our upper body will stay about the same during that. To get a good base, feet about shoulder width apart, our strong foot, half a foot to a foot back. If you're left-handed, that'd be your left foot. If you're right-handed, that's gonna be your right foot. Now we're gonna bend our knees a little bit. We don't want them locked up. We want to bend our knees a little bit, but we're not doing the tactical turtle stuff that you saw back in the 80s. We're bending our knees just a tad so we can move if we have to. Now, our upper body from our waist up, think of that kind of like a tank turret. Once we actually start getting that stance, we can move this around basically 180 degrees. Now, our base, if we need to kneel, squat, sit, that can change, but even if we're kneeling, our upper body is staying pretty much the same. If we're moving and shooting, our upper body stays pretty much the same. Now it's our base that is moving. Once we've established a good base, our chest, the majority of our body weight is over that front foot. Our knees are bent slightly. Our hands, they're gonna come together. We don't want to lock our elbows out, but we want a slight bend in them. That is going to allow our elbows to act like shock absorbers on your car. So when it does take that impact, it moves a little bit without moving our body. So I have a friend here, he's been shooting for a while. He's a fairly decent shooter, but we're just gonna try to revise his shooting stance to make it the best that we can. Okay, and if you wanna go without pulling a gun out or anything, go ahead and get in a decent shooting stance or one shooting stance, okay. Yep, so right there, he's got his feet about shoulder width apart. Go ahead and put your feet together like we talked about earlier. Okay, so this is an example of not getting a good base. Now we could still shoot this way, but it doesn't allow us to move left, right, forward, back as easily. And go ahead and put your hands out in front of you. Okay, so now if I apply pressure, he's not as stable in that path. Now go ahead and put your feet out shoulder width apart. Strong foot about half foot back. Now if I apply that same pressure, Nick's not moving nearly as much as he was when his feet were together. Now, talking about arms, we can see here, his elbows, they're not 100% locked out. They're right about 90%, give or take. Our bodies don't really work in percentages, but it's extended just enough to now if we apply pressure like we were doing earlier, his elbows are going to act as those shock absorbers to help control that recoil. Now, one thing that helps is when we actually have our gun in our hand, if we bend those elbows up towards the sky, so go ahead and do that now if you have, yep. Doing that also helps a little bit controlling that recoil because it applies pressure to the top of our hands, which applies pressure to the top of the gun. So now the question is, how do we grip the gun? So we have an unloaded gun here. We're going to basically do some dry fire in this aspect. But how do we grip the gun? So this here is the tang. We want to get as high up on that gun as possible. So I'm going to take the web of my hand and get it up there as high as possible. My skin is actually going to get bind up against the frame of the gun because I don't want to see any daylight between the top of that gun and my hand. I want to get my middle finger as high up to that trigger guard as possible. My right thumb really does not do a whole lot. I'll have this gap here in. I'm coming in kind of like if I'm doing a handshake. I'm filling that gap in as much as possible. Now, as far as how hard do I squeeze the gun? I've seen a lot more issues with people under squeezing than I have with over squeezing. If you're squeezing the gun to the point where it's shaking, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just back off a little bit right before you hit that point. I would rather you shake a little bit than not enough where the gun starts limp wristing or you can't control it. So we've got our grip here. We want our thumbs on the same side. We want to get as high as possible with that support hand grip. That way we can really control that recoil. Once we do that, so we'll extend the gun all the way out from here. At this point we can get a good sight picture, turn press and fire a round off. I've instructed Nick to get a bad grip on purpose. He drew the gun, he had a good grip. For demonstration purposes, I told him to get a bad grip. So go ahead and take this hand off the gun for a moment, Nick. So as we can see here, we have a pretty big gap between his hand and the frame of that gun. We even have a gap here between that middle finger and that ring finger. So what I want you to do is get high up on this gun, okay, and close that gap. Flag that thumb up a little bit. Now get that left hand up there, yep, there you go. And then just set that right thumb on top of that left. Now, I don't want you to be afraid to squeeze, so squeeze the gun. It's not shaking or anything, is it? So at this point, bend those elbows up a little bit. Yep, there you go. So you got a slight bend in the elbows and the elbows are facing up. That's applying pressure to the side of our hands, our thumbs, on the gun, and we get as close to that bore axis as possible so we can really control that recoil. Now, from the camera angle, you can't see his feet, but his feet shoulder width apart, strong foot back half a little bit, and his center mass is over that left foot. So, one thing we're looking at, overall his stance grip's pretty good. At first when he pulled the gun out, he started to squat a little more. We really want to try to avoid over squatting, but a little bit of bend's not an issue. But grip's good, arm's good. You warmed up, Nick?
Yep.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, I want you to fire 6 rounds pretty fast. We're going to look at your recoil, see how well you control that. Okay. Just for reference, we got a FDIQ target at about 5 yards. Nick's going to send off 6 rounds right now. Whenever you're ready. As we saw when he was shooting, that first round jumped a little bit. I get it. First shot of the day. We haven't actually warmed up yet. But those next 5 rounds, that gun tracked very well, pretty smooth. And when you look here at the target, even though he was shooting fairly fast, 6 rounds, pretty close together. So one question I got asked is it better to lock your arms out or is it better to have bend? So go ahead and lock your arms all the way out. If we do this, if you watch his shoulders as I apply pressure to him, we can see his arms, we can see his chest, his elbows, his arms are all moving back a little bit and up. So go ahead and put a little bit of bend. Bring those elbows up. And so now when I apply that same pressure, we saw a lot less movement in the gun in his upper body. So by applying that bend in our elbows and our arms, we're really able to control that recoil. The gun doesn't move nearly as much as if we lock our arms out. We don't see that movement in our shoulders. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad way to lock our arms out. Just for the most part, we generally want to have a little bit of bend. That way we don't have as much muzzle rise. Now, some instructors will tell you to lock your arms out. It's just personal preference and what their goal in mind is. But for the most part, if we want to shoot quick and accurately, apply a little bit of bend in those elbows. Now, with that in mind, this does not substitute getting actual training from an actual instructor. This is an addition to that, or maybe before you go to those trainings. Now, if you watch this video and then go to that instructor, go with an open mind. If they tell you to do something different, make sure you do it. Thank you for watching our videos. If you liked the videos, please like, subscribe, leave comments below. We will also be doing some training coming up. I'll be adding that QR code probably right here, maybe right here. Just so you can scan that QR code. If you're watching on a TV, computer, if you have an iPhone or Android, you just take a screenshot. You should also be able to go into your photos and touch that QR code and your phone will be able to recognize it. It'll pull you up with the link to that training course. It'll be an 8-hour course down in Alabama. So if you want to take classes with us, feel free to hit that code. It'd mean a lot to us if you guys support us that way. So.